Okay, so imagine this. What if you could build a whole self-sufficient society from the ground up? And I'm not talking about abstract ideas. I mean with actual physical hardware. Well, today we're diving into a company called DeReticular, and they have this really bold plan to do exactly that. It's called Operation Octagon. Now that line, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But it's not. That's the actual opening line from an internal document for Operation Octagon. And that one sentence, wow, it just perfectly captures this pretty radical idea. What if you could create the bedrock of a society, the infrastructure, that operates completely on its own without relying on the systems we all depend on every single day? And that right there is the central idea they're running with. They call it sovereign infrastructure. I mean, just try to imagine a world for a second where the cloud doesn't exist or the power grid goes down. Sovereign infrastructure is all about building these super tough, self-sufficient, and really smart networks that are designed to work perfectly, especially when everything else has failed. You can almost think of it like a high-tech survival kit, but for an entire community. So this is the story of Operation Octagon, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to break down what this thing actually is, how these civilizations in a box are put together, and what it really means when the power to build a society is put in the hands of the people on the ground. All right, first up, let's talk about the vision, because to really get the solution here, you have to understand the problem that's driving a company like DeReticular. And it really comes down to the fragility of our super interconnected world. Right? You have a single point of failure. Maybe it's in the cloud, maybe it's the power grid, and suddenly you have these massive cascading blackouts. That is precisely what they're trying to design against. And this comparison here really lays it all out. On one side, you've got our legacy infrastructure. It's centralized. Think of it like one giant data center. If that goes down, everything that relies on it goes down too. It's fragile. The Octagon model, on the other hand, is a mesh. It's decentralized, it's resilient, and it's designed to be offline first. Now that's a key term. It doesn't just mean it can survive without the internet. It's literally built to thrive in that kind of environment. Okay, so that all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually build a network like this? Well, it's a surprisingly elegant system, and it all starts with one very specific, very foundational number. Yup, the number 8. Everything, and I mean everything, in Operation Octagon revolves around this number. It's not random at all, it's the absolute core of their entire philosophy, from the physical hardware all the way up to the software that runs on it. And here's how. The fundamental building block of the whole system is called an octagon cell. So what is that? Well, it starts with something called a compute node, which is just a fancy way of saying a really tough, specialized computer. An octagon cell takes 8 of these nodes and bundles them together into a single, complete, totally self-sustaining ecosystem. All right, so now we get to the really cool part. Let's look at the 8 sovereign nodes. This is where you see how a group of 8 computers actually becomes the blueprint for a mini civilization. We're going to look at the specific job that each of these 8 nodes has inside a single octagon cell.
And this table is where it all just clicks into place. This isn't just a computer network, it's literally a society's operating system. You've got your command center for admin and finance, you've got the watchtower for network security, the plasma forge handles energy, and it just keeps going. The reliquary for physical security, the nomad fleet for logistics, the sanctuary for offline healthcare, the biosphere for agriculture, and finally, the field operator, which is the actual human interface to manage the whole thing. All 8 working together, a programmable society where every critical function has its own dedicated, rugged piece of hardware.
So as you can probably guess, these aren't just some off-the-shelf PCs you can buy anywhere. DeReticular puts them through this incredibly intense manufacturing process they call forged in the crucible. It's this whole workflow designed to guarantee these things can survive in the absolute harshest environments you can possibly imagine. So here's how their sovereign factory works. Step 1 is intake and thermal hardening. They literally rip out the standard thermal paste and replace it with this high-grade stuff so the computers can run without any air conditioning. Then, step 2, the flash forge, where they can provision like 80 nodes at the same time. After that comes the crucible, and this is brutal. It's a 24-hour stress test at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, just to find any weakness. And finally, step 4, they kit the whole thing out. All 8 nodes and everything you need get packed into one of these military-grade Pelican cases they call a drop pod. And the whole point of this intense process is their philosophy of zero tolerance for infant mortality in the field. It's all about an obsession with reliability. The idea is simple, right? If a part is going to fail, it has to fail in their factory, under their heat lamps, not out in the field, not in some remote medical clinic or a disaster zone where people's lives literally depend on it. Okay, so they've built this unbelievably reliable piece of hardware. But then what? How do you, the user, actually take ownership and, make sure the network is truly yours and yours alone? This is where it gets really, really interesting. It's called the claiming ceremony. See, the hardware ships in a state they call cryptographic amnesia. It's a great term. What it means is that the factory that built the network has zero, and I mean zero, access to it once it's done. All the root passwords, all the keys, they're randomized and then instantly destroyed. The factory itself can't even get in. So that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? If the manufacturer can't get in, how does the owner take control? Well, the answer is this really clever physical on-site ritual they've designed. It's called the claiming ceremony. Here's how it works. First, the user unboxes these factory blank hardware tokens called sovereign keys. They're totally empty. Then, the people who are going to operate the system, the admin, the medic, whoever, they physically plug their blank keys into their specific machines. The moment they do that, a protocol called identity genesis runs, and it generates brand new, unique cryptographic keys locally, right there on the device. And in that instant, the factory is locked out forever, and the network belongs only to the people holding those keys. It's not just about owning hardware, it's about owning the trust itself. Okay, let's zoom back out. We've seen how this stuff is built, how it's secured, so the big question is, who is this for? Why would you build infrastructure without permission? What are the actual real-world uses for a civilization in a box? Well, the use cases are pretty wild, actually. Think about a disaster recovery task force going into a hurricane zone where all communications are out. You could literally airdrop one of these drop pods and have an instant hospital, a command center, and a logistics network up and running in a matter of hours. Or you could have regional agricultural co-ops sharing data securely without needing some big tech company. We're even talking about sovereign island nations running their own essential services completely independent of any foreign cloud provider. And then there's the price, which might be the most disruptive thing of all. $34,776. Now, that's not for one computer. That's for what they call a Triad. That's 3 complete 8-node networks. To quote them, that's the cost to establish 3 indestructible, hyper-localized technology outposts. We're not talking millions of dollars here. This is actually accessible. And that brings us to the final, really profound question that this kind of technology forces us all to ask. I mean, when you can literally buy a civilization in a box, what does it actually mean to build a society? This goes way beyond just resilient hardware. It's a fundamental shift. When the power to create the bedrock of a community, the energy, the food, the healthcare, the security, becomes a product you can just buy, it changes the game. It changes who gets to build, who gets to be self-sufficient, and ultimately, it really makes you rethink the definition of a society itself.